World title in everyone's imagination. That's the heavyweight champ. You were here. Everyone else was here. But since then, the feeling has been Joshua makes all this money fighting anyway, 30 million pounds, whatever it is. Why should he take 40 or 50 to fight Wilder when he's making against anybody? He can make 30, 40 million pounds, whatever it is.
No fantasy contracts, just reality. You know, bringing our work to the table and bargaining and negotiating what we're worth and making this fight.
So here's what just happened. One of boxing's heavyweight giants just exposed something that nobody was supposed to hear about. Anthony Joshua casually revealed details of a private conversation that sent shockwaves through the entire sport. This wasn't your typical social media drama or manufactured beef. This was about a direct proposition, serious money, and Jake Paul making an offer that crossed every line imaginable.
Jake Paul is so relevant because he's found a way to bypass promoters and make money in the boxing rings instead of being a prisoner to the promoters. Even though he didn't fight anybody, he's about to fight Anthony Joshua, and we'll see what happens with that. Anthony Joshua should knock him into tomorrow because he's the bigger fighter with incredible power, but he's got a glass jaw. So if Jake Paul catches him, who knows?
When this story first broke, it immediately felt different from the usual boxing circus noise. This wasn't some promotional stunt or carefully orchestrated controversy designed to sell tickets. What we're talking about here is raw power dynamics, massive financial influence, and an alleged attempt to manipulate the very foundation of what competitive boxing represents.
Fighting's not just physical, it's psychological. And when you understand the psychological warfare, I did say to you that, Jake, what's gonna happen? I'm gonna see a time when I'm gonna take your soul and you're either gonna give up or you're gonna get knocked out. And unless you have that instinct, you just will never be a good fighter. So I wish that I could have knocked him out at the start, but as we saw tonight,
Jake Paul brings undeniable energy to everything he touches, but the boxing community has witnessed plenty of controversial moments before, and this one struck a completely different chord because of the personalities involved and the casual way these details came to light. Anthony Joshua has built his entire reputation on measured responses and careful public statements.
Out there that are going, Jake deserves credit, this is amazing, he's gone 6 rounds with Anthony Joshua. He hasn't gone 6 rounds with Anthony Joshua, he spent 5 rounds on his bloody bike, and the other diving for cover. Come on, let's get real about what happened last night. The dude basically used the greedy to hoodwink the stupid. Fair play to the kid, man. He made 50 million plus. I mean, someone's just sent me a message saying that they did 90 million. Respect. There's people out there saying, oh, he kept getting dropped multiple times and getting up. No, he didn't. Stop.
The man rarely gets pulled into messy public feuds, weighs every word before speaking, and fully understands the massive influence his voice carries in the sport. So when whispers started circulating about this private conversation with Jake Paul, the entire boxing world paid attention in a way they rarely do.
AJ, do you think Jake is on your level whatsoever?
No. No.
No, okay.
Respectfully. Because it's clear. If I say yes, I'm gonna be lying to myself, and I can't lie to myself. It's not that he can't compete,
Right.
but when you talk about, for example, music, how many albums I put out, how many mixtapes I put out, he just hasn't got the body of work I've got in boxing.
Got you.
This revelation didn't come from some bitter rival trying to score cheap points or gain promotional leverage. This was a legitimate heavyweight champion, calmly describing an encounter that potentially shakes the credibility of everything modern boxing claims to represent. The timing and context make this story impossible to ignore. Jake Paul has constructed his entire boxing persona around pure spectacle, brilliant marketing instincts, and an uncanny ability to manipulate media attention for maximum impact. He transforms fights into full-scale entertainment productions rather than traditional sporting competitions, constantly blurring the boundaries between genuine athletics and manufactured drama. This strategy has generated incredible visibility and enormous financial return. However, it has also created persistent doubts about the authenticity of everything he touches. Those doubts exploded into serious concerns the moment this story went public. Based on the details that spread like wildfire across social media, this interaction wasn't presented as some casual joke or simple miscommunication. It was described as a legitimate business proposition, one that implied fight outcomes could be predetermined behind closed doors for maximum profit. The suggestion wasn't subtle. It revolved around crafting a fight that prioritized brand building, narrative control, and long-term financial gain over genuine sporting competition. That implication alone was enough to disturb fans, active fighters, and industry promoters alike. What made the situation even more disturbing was how and where this information first gained momentum. When stories like this emerge through carefully controlled press conferences, they're usually written off as strategic information leaks.
Or Jake would have moved around the ring at 100 miles an hour. There's two things I would have done. Tried to shut Jake down at 100 miles an hour, or I would have gone on the back foot. So Jake decided to move around the ring, and I decided to put the pressure on. What I could have done better is a lot of things. 100%. In the fight game, you've seen the amazing fighters that have graced us over the last 100 years, and the expectations that we put on ourselves are
But this surfaced during an extended, unscripted conversation format, where guests typically abandon their public personas and speak more freely. The delivery wasn't dramatic or attention-seeking. It came across as straightforward and almost hesitant, like this information had been weighing heavily for quite some time.
Suing Anthony Joshua. And the reason has everybody side-eyeing this whole situation. From what's being said, Jake is claiming Anthony Joshua went off script. And when I say off script, I mean, there was supposedly a no knockout clause, or at least very specific fight rules, and Joshua hitting Jake so hard that his jaw got dislocated in 2 places was not part of that agreement. Jake basically saying that punch crossed the line from just boxing into what he's calling malicious intent.
The notion that someone would approach Anthony Joshua with a proposal to predetermine fight elements crosses a fundamental psychological boundary. Joshua embodies everything traditional boxing represents, including legitimate championship belts, elite-level competition, and a career trajectory built through years of grinding progression. The fact that someone would consider approaching him with an offer to choreograph aspects of a fight reveals how certain people view modern boxing personalities. It demonstrates a belief that athletic legacy can be bought and sold just like any other marketing commodity. This is exactly where public opinion fractures dramatically. Defenders of crossover boxing attempted to minimize the gravity of the situation, characterizing it as simple miscommunication or strategic discussion blown completely out of proportion. But longtime critics interpreted it as definitive proof of suspicions they've harbored for years. From their perspective, this wasn't some random isolated incident. It represented a clear pattern where entertainment value consistently threatens to completely overwhelm genuine sporting competition. Anthony Joshua's reaction to this alleged proposition is what transformed gossip into legitimate controversy. There was absolutely no hint of consideration or willingness to negotiate. His position was uncompromising and almost contemptuous. It reinforced the reality that certain fighters maintain clear ethical boundaries that cannot be crossed, regardless of financial incentives or media exposure opportunities. That unwavering refusal became the most powerful element of the entire story, even more significant than the original accusation itself.
Jake Paul gets knocked out predictably by Anthony Joshua in tonight's fight. Now, I am torn on this fight. When it first started and Joshua was giving it, I'm thinking, oh, here we go again. It's the Tyson fight again. We're talking about 2 fighters who are pretending. It looked like a rocky fight at the start. Joshua was afraid to let go. He was just like tapping. Let Jake get a few punches in him, I think. And then I'm thinking, hang on.
From Jake Paul's standpoint, the extended silence or vague deflection that followed only amplified public scrutiny and suspicion. In today's environment where immediate social media responses are standard practice, the lack of a direct, comprehensive denial allowed wild speculation to multiply exponentially. Boxing fans began meticulously analyzing timelines, reviewing past interviews, and examining promotional strategies, desperately searching for evidence that supported these explosive claims. Every previous fight, every questionable moment, every controversial decision was suddenly re-examined through this completely new and damaging lens. The sport now finds itself split between 2 fundamentally incompatible philosophies. On one side stand fighters who approach boxing as the ultimate test of physical skill, mental endurance, and personal integrity. On the opposite side are personalities who treat boxing primarily as content creation, where actual outcomes matter far less than social media engagement and viral moments. When these conflicting worldviews inevitably clash, explosive tension becomes unavoidable. The alleged bribe attempt wasn't simply about exchanging money for predetermined results. It was about seizing control over public narratives, control over career perception, and control over the entire trajectory of professional legacy. Accepting such an arrangement would mean surrendering the personal agency that fighters like Joshua have spent decades earning through blood, sweat, and sacrifice. That's precisely why this story resonated far beyond typical industry gossip. It became a defining moment that questioned what professional boxing is rapidly becoming.
Messy. If Jake is really saying this fight was supposed to follow a script, then what does that say about the event, the Vegas crowd, the betting money, all of that? Because that opens up a whole different conversation nobody wants to touch. He's allegedly claiming Anthony Joshua could be on the hook for something like $20 million for violating the rules and going beyond what was agreed upon. But let's be real for a second. This is boxing. People get hit, jaws get broken. That's literally the risk you take stepping into the ring.
As these discussions gained momentum across social platforms, other prominent fighters and respected analysts began weighing in through indirect commentary. Some emphasized the critical importance of fiercely protecting the sport's fundamental credibility and integrity. Others dropped subtle hints about personal experiences that suggested similar questionable approaches occur far more frequently than casual fans could ever imagine. Even without explicitly naming specific individuals, the underlying message was unmistakably clear. This scenario wasn't some unthinkable fantasy. The involvement of major sports media platforms created additional complexity when stories of this magnitude intersect with established broadcasting networks. It forces an uncomfortable industry-wide reckoning. These networks depend heavily on both traditional championship fighters and crossover entertainment stars to consistently drive viewership numbers and advertising revenue. Successfully balancing those competing financial interests becomes increasingly challenging, but what truly mattered was what these fighters represented when their principles faced serious testing. Jake Paul's personal brand, constructed entirely on systematic disruption of established norms, actually thrives on manufactured controversy and public attention. But there's a crucial distinction between challenging outdated traditions and systematically undermining fundamental trust and competitive integrity. If boxing fans begin genuinely believing that fight outcomes are secretly negotiable commodities, the entire sport loses all meaning and emotional investment. Television viewership might experience temporary spikes, but long-term credibility suffers irreversible damage. The precise timing of this revelation carries additional significance that cannot be overlooked. Professional boxing already faces intense pressure from competing entertainment options and rapidly shifting audience expectations across all demographics. Public trust represents an incredibly fragile commodity in modern sports entertainment. Once that trust is shattered, rebuilding it becomes monumentally difficult, if not completely impossible. Stories like this one accelerate existing skepticism, particularly among traditional boxing purists who already feel completely alienated by spectacle-driven promotional events.
Have a section where the two parties are going to meet, talk, discuss, have this. Just watch this video.
And mentally.
It's already written.
Where?
In the history books, brother.
In yours, not mine.
No, it is.
No.
You'll see. There's only one God, and God wrote it.
You see, with Jake, what I learned about Jake is that he's a mental person. This is my observation. Not only the physical aspects of training, but the way he thinks, meditation, breath work. If I can break his soul and I can break his mentality, then I've broken Jake.
There's also a profound psychological component that demands serious consideration. Professional fighters exist in an environment where mutual respect functions as the primary form of currency and social capital. Any approach that implies willingness to manipulate predetermined outcomes represents deeply personal disrespect, completely regardless of stated intentions or financial motivation. It suggests a fundamental lack of belief in that fighter's natural competitiveness, personal principles, and professional integrity. As weeks transformed into months, this story refused to fade into background noise. Instead, it continued evolving and expanding. Video clips underwent frame-by-frame analysis, expert commentary proliferated across multiple platforms, and discussions migrated from niche fan forums into mainstream sports debate programming. Whether every single detail could be independently verified became almost irrelevant to the larger conversation. Anthony Joshua never positioned himself as some crusading whistleblower, exposing systematic corruption throughout the industry. There was absolutely no sense of moral crusade or personal vendetta driving his statements. That understated subtlety is precisely what made his account feel genuinely believable rather than strategically manufactured. It felt less like a calculated attack on a business rival, and more like a straightforward explanation for why certain highly anticipated fights never actually materialized despite public demand. Sometimes what doesn't happen tells a more powerful story than any amount of promotional spectacle ever could. The broader implications of this revelation are impossible to ignore or dismiss. Professional boxing currently stands at a critical crossroads that will define its future identity. The sport can continue aggressively blending pure entertainment with legitimate athletic competition, or it can make a conscious decision to reassert the fundamental principles that distinguish genuine sport from choreographed performance art. Incidents like this one force every stakeholder to make definitive choices about their priorities, whether they feel prepared for that decision or not.
Was he carrying Jake Paul? Was he carrying Jake Paul because of the script with the mentality of knocking him out before time? Or was Joshua not wanting to potentially hurt this guy? Like, hurt him. Like, he was throwing single punches, sometimes the odd 1 or 2s. You know what I mean? The first 4 rounds, you're talking like 8 punches to 5 punches. And it was like, I was thinking that there's some sort of script.
As industry attention gradually shifts toward future high-profile matchups and evolving promotional strategies, the lasting memory of this explosive revelation continues to linger in the background. It becomes part of the persistent background noise that actively shapes public expectations and media coverage. Active fighters will face entirely different categories of interview questions going forward. Devoted fans will watch future events with noticeably sharper skepticism and critical analysis. Professional promoters will navigate public statements much more carefully, at least when cameras are rolling and microphones are active. That initial crack in the carefully maintained facade has continued expanding steadily as more industry observers began connecting previously unrelated dots into coherent patterns. Business decisions that once appeared to be simple promotional moves suddenly looked far more calculated and potentially manipulative. High-profile matchups that were aggressively marketed as legitimate competitive contests began feeling suspiciously curated and predetermined. The boxing industry has always required delicate balancing between commercial success and competitive authenticity, but this particular moment brutally exposed how fragile that balance has become when pure commerce dominates without adequate checks or accountability. What genuinely unsettled many longtime industry insiders wasn't just the specific allegation itself, but rather how completely believable it sounded within the current professional landscape. This time around, public responses were notably cautious, carefully measured, and frequently indirect rather than forceful or confident. That universal restraint suggested widespread discomfort rather than genuine confidence in the system's integrity. It strongly hinted at an entire industry acutely aware of its fundamental vulnerabilities, deeply unsure whether aggressive pushback would expose far more damaging information than it could possibly conceal. Anthony Joshua's central role in this unfolding story continued evolving significantly, even without any additional public statements or clarification. His deliberate refusal to engage in sensational follow-up interviews or social media exchanges reinforced the growing perception that this revelation wasn't motivated by attention-seeking or promotional opportunity. It was about establishing clear ethical boundaries and moving forward with integrity intact. Through his measured silence, he effectively forced others throughout the industry to confront uncomfortable questions they would strongly prefer to avoid completely. If someone of his international stature and financial security wasn't willing to compromise his principles for any amount of money, what did that reality say about similar offers being made to less established fighters with fewer options?
The Jake Paul fight script just got leaked and the details are absolutely insane. This script goes back to the initial promotion where he was supposed to fight a super underweight Gervonta Davis. But we now learn this fight was never supposed to happen. The plan was always to fight Anthony Joshua, but they started with a villain arc by positioning him against someone 70 pounds lighter. So when he goes to fight someone heavier instead, he looks like a hero underdog instead of the initial side. But that's just the beginning. The script for the actual fight is set up for it to go the distance and Paul to be awarded the win by decision.
The extensive ripple effect spread far beyond traditional boxing circles into broader sports entertainment. Corporate sponsors, television broadcasters, and major investors pay extremely close attention to credibility issues because they understand long-term financial implications. They recognize that while manufactured controversy can generate valuable short-term buzz and social media engagement, sustained doubt about competitive competitive integrity systematically undermines long-term brand value and consumer loyalty. When devoted fans begin questioning whether outcomes represent genuine athletic achievement, their emotional engagement shifts from passionate investment to detached casual consumption. That fundamental transformation changes absolutely everything about the sport's economic model and cultural relevance. Younger fighters closely watching this entire situation unfold absorbed an unspoken but crucial lesson about professional survival and career management. Success in professional boxing has always required skillful navigation of complex political relationships and business partnerships. But this particular episode highlighted the critical importance of choosing professional alignments extremely carefully and thoughtfully. Not every lucrative opportunity actually strengthens a long-term career trajectory. Some apparently attractive deals quietly erode hard-earned reputations, leaving fighters professionally compromised long after the immediate financial benefits are completely spent. The entire crossover boxing business model came under intense renewed scrutiny and critical examination. While this approach has undeniably attracted new audiences to traditional boxing, each time the sport adapts to accommodate entertainment priorities, it often does so quite painfully. What makes this current moment fundamentally different is the incredible speed at which narratives spread and solidify into accepted truth across social media platforms. There's virtually no opportunity for quiet resolution or damage control when every single development gets dissected in real time by millions of engaged observers. The alleged attempt to influence Anthony Joshua's professional decisions didn't just challenge individual ethical standards or personal principles, it directly challenged the audience's fundamental trust in competitive authenticity. Boxing fans desperately want to believe that when two skilled fighters enter the ring, the final outcome remains genuinely uncertain until the final bell. That essential uncertainty represents the very soul of competitive sport. Remove that element completely, and what remains is elaborate performance without meaningful stakes or emotional investment. This episode also starkly underscored the significant power imbalance between established championship fighters and well-funded promotional disruptors seeking to reshape the industry. Even globally recognized fighters with massive personal brands aren't completely immune to intense pressure when enormous media platforms and unlimited capital get strategically involved. Successfully resisting that coordinated pressure requires not just strong personal principles, but also sufficient professional leverage and financial independence. Joshua possessed both crucial elements. Many other fighters may not be nearly as fortunate or well-positioned to maintain their independence. As immediate public attention gradually shifts to other controversies, the fundamental shock value fades, but the underlying questions remain completely unresolved and increasingly troubling. How many similar private conversations never reach public awareness or media coverage? How frequently are ethical boundaries tested quietly behind closed doors, possibly with entirely different results? The complete absence of definitive answers only fuels additional speculation, and that persistent speculation systematically fills the void left by industry-wide lack of transparency. What emerges clearly is that this wasn't some isolated controversial spark or random incident. It functioned as a signal flare dramatically illuminating tensions that have been steadily building throughout the sport for several years. Professional boxing currently stands at a critical decision point where choices made right now will fundamentally shape its cultural identity and competitive credibility for the next generation of fighters and fans. Whether the sport leans further into pure spectacle and entertainment value, or makes a conscious decision to recommit to competitive integrity and athletic authenticity, will ultimately determine how stories like this are remembered and what lessons are learned. Anthony Joshua's decision to expose this situation didn't provide satisfying closure or resolution, because genuine closure would require systematic industry-wide changes. Instead, it delivered brutal clarity which proves far more disruptive to established power structures. This clarity forces an extremely uncomfortable reality into the harsh public spotlight, one that can no longer be conveniently dismissed as mere speculation, cynical criticism, or competitive jealousy.